Welcome to the Turks in 2010. Michael Shore here with Richard Eskow. Are you a 2010er or a 2010er?
I'm going to go with the 2010.
The 2010.
Because, you know, we didn't say we're going to party like it's 1,999 now, did we?
No, we
didn't. We said 1999. We partied like it's 1999.
For the record, I didn't do either, but for...
Well, I didn't either, but hypothetically speaking, 2010. I'm going with 2010.
Okay. Well,
how about you?
Well, I'm a 2010er too, but I got upbraided for it. It was too kind of modern, and my friend Matthew told me that I should. He is a 2010 house.
Well, that takes too long to say.
I actually wanted to be a 2010 because that's my favorite thing that I've heard so far about it. In any case, Michael Shore, Richard's here with me. We are doing the show. Cenk is out until Wednesday, taking a little extra New Year trip. And we're going to cover a lot of things. I'll be here tomorrow with Wes Clark. And we have a lot to cover today. It's been obviously a very exciting break in terms of news. And I think that heading into what will be a pivotal time, Richard, in American history because of the health care bill. We're fortunate to have Richard with us because that is his area of expertise. And we'll talk a little bit about some machinations that happened with that health bill today, some of which I don't agree with, but we'll see. We'll cover that ground. We have some interesting guests covering all of sort of the gamut of interesting stories. And one of whom is going to be talking to us a little bit about the bombing in the CIA, where some CIA operatives perished in a bombing. We're going to talk about Rush Limbaugh. We're going to talk about Tiger Woods. We're going to talk about, I can't imagine. Oh, and John Brennan, of course. Our position, the bomber that tried to blow up a Delta Northwest flight. So we have a lot to cover.
That made a little bit of news and changed life for a lot of travelers, including himself, obviously. And this is Richard R.J. Eskow here with Michael to talk about all these good stories. And we're going to start off easy, I think, and work you into the more traumatic, dramatic, eventful episodes of the last 8 days or so. So we can start out talking about.
Well, but the very first thing I have to mention is that I won my fantasy football league since this happened. The late Ben Mankiewicz was in my fantasy football league, and he and I.
I thought you were going to say he was in your fantasy.
No, he's never in my fantasy. Beating him in fantasy football is always in my fantasy. So I'm proud of that, and I won a football pool. Now we can get on to all the business. I just had to announce that. The first business I think that Richard was talking about. And I think we should start as light as we possibly can. And I think that in order to do that, we have to discuss, and I think it's important that we have Richard with us for this as well, something that Fox's Brit Hume, who I will confess, when he was with ABC, I used to think was really good at his job. And it sort of clouds me now, because he probably still is good at his job.
Well, I thought he was good, too. He was also one of the first reporters to start covering the Internet and digital technology. So he had his day, but his day was long ago.
Right. And he is no longer the anchor of the special report with Brit Hume or whatever. He was sort of one of the featured big pulls that Fox took from the major networks. Chris Wallace came after that.
Does Brit seem a little angry to you?
Brit seems slightly angry. And we should say that Brit is very conservative. And in David Brock's book, bringing what was it?
Blinded by the Light.
Blinded by the Right. Yeah, Blinded by the Right. He talked about how conservative Brit Hume was, and that was when I first learned of how conservative he was. This was in his pre-Fox days. Now it turns out that he's not just conservative, he's a little nuts. He's evangelical, he's proselytizing, and he's talking about our great friend in America, Tiger Woods. Let's listen, if we can, and watch Brit Hume on Fox talking about Tiger Woods. That's clip 5, JR.
Tiger Woods will recover as a golfer. Whether he can recover as a person, I think, is a very open question, and it's a tragic situation with him. I think he's lost his family. It's not clear to me that whether he'll be able to have a relationship with his children. But the Tiger Woods that emerges once the news value dies out of this scandal, the extent to which he can recover, it seems to me, depends on his faith. He's said to be a Buddhist. I don't think that faith offers the kind of forgiveness and redemption that is offered by the Christian faith. So my message to Tiger would be, Tiger, turn to the Christian faith, and you can make a total recovery and be a great example to the world.
You know what I love about this is, of course, it fits in with what we all know about the Dalai Lama, which is he's the most unforgiving SOB you could ever meet, because forgiveness has no place in his ideology. You cross that guy, you're dead.
Right.
That's number one.
There's no forgiveness in Buddhism.
No forgiveness.
Well, I just also like the idea is that, well, go ahead. Keep
well,
going.
you know, I should say, by the way, that I'm a contributing editor to a Buddhist magazine.
Yeah.
So I've written a lot about Buddhism, and I think as a sales pitch for Christianity, it may be better than we think, because think about it. What he's really saying is you can go out and mess around as much as you want and then come back in and be forgiven. But I think...
well, by the way, it works, because it seems like every Christian, every public Christian, and of course I'm exaggerating now, but there's so many prominent Christians who go through this hypocrisy, as we've seen, and most of them elected officials that I'm talking about, who come back and then they're forgiven. And we see right now, because people like Brit Hume say, just come home to the Christian church, come to Jesus, and then, you know, we can get over what you did.
It's a three-step process. First, you come to the church. Secondly, you go to rehab.
Right.
He's got to go to rehab for something. And third, you learn to cry on command.
So you
that
go to
can
church, right? You go
church,
to church,
rehab,
and
cry
cry.
on command.
Yeah.
And when you cry on command, you have the news conference, and you weep and you sob and you say,
Yeah.
"I'm terribly sorry." Then, when the dust clears a little bit, you go out and do it again.
And you know what?
See, it's great.
I love also the idea that this could hypothetically engender a crazy, angry response from Buddhists who don't go crazy or become angry. The sort of the tenet of their religion is not to be offended by this.
Yeah, they're not the guys who will slap you down.
Right.
You know, I mean, I did happen to look at some of the Buddhist blogs. You know, there's a whole Buddhist blogosphere out there, and it was entertaining.
I didn't know that.
Hey, live and learn.
Yeah.
And it was entertaining to see them struggle with the kind of, I'm not angry about this, but if I were angry about it, this is what I would be angry about. It's a mischaracterization, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
But they also, but I forgive him.
I don't know what, but I forgive him.
I
of
forgive
course.
him.
Even though I'm a Buddhist and we don't forgive people, I will forgive Brit Hume. The other thing that I like that Brit Hume said was, we know he'll recover as a golfer. He's the best golfer ever.
Right.
He has to do zero recovery as a golfer. There's nothing he can do better as a golfer. Just the fact that, it's time for Tiger to come home to the Christian church, and Brit Hume is telling us that, is ridiculous, and I'm so glad that everybody who's watching and listening has gotten to see that.
And you know what else? Last comment about this, I was sick of Tiger Woods before any of this happened. I had seen his face quite enough.
Yeah.
He's a magnificent athlete, but I had seen one too many product endorsements already.
There are too many. And by the way, and this may have been talked about ad nauseum beforehand, but this is not the part of the Tiger Woods story that everybody's talking about. The company Accenture broke ties with him.
Right.
Okay. Accenture paid him a tremendous sum of money to be their spokesperson. So Accenture has said, we're not going to do this because of the example and the obvious reasons that people would break ties now with Tiger Woods. And they've spent so much money, and it's everywhere. And can you tell me what Accenture does?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, they don't want you to know, or they wouldn't be called Accenture.
Well, maybe. I mean, it's just ridiculous that they had this powerful spokesperson they spent so much money for, and so many people don't know what they do. It turns out they're a management consulting firm or an accounting firm. See, I don't even know. But anyhow, but now that Tiger Woods is cured, he just goes to Jesus. Everything will be good. And so that's one problem in America that got taken care of.
And no more texting for Tiger.
And no more texting for Tiger. Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, but he can text once he's forgiven by the Christian church. That'll be fine. Speaking of recovery, and we bid no one, even our worst enemies, to go through terrible times. And our good friend Rush Limbaugh, radio announcer, was vacationing in Hawaii and had chest pains and was admitted to the hospital. Rush, of course, cannot say anything without making a pointed remark, even through the gratitude of his recovery. And this is clip number 5, JR, Rush Limbaugh.
The people here at Queens Hospital could not have been better. I feel very, very fortunate. I've been treated to the best health care the world has to offer, and that is right here in the United States of America. Again, the treatment I received here was the best that the world has to offer, and based on what happened to me here, I don't think there's one thing wrong with the American healthcare system. It is working just fine, just dandy, and I got nothing special. I got no special treatment other than what anybody else would have called, been brought in with the same kinds of symptoms. The care was extensive, it was personal, and it was complete, and it was very confidence-inspiring. And I never, once I got here, had any fears because of the manner in which I was treated. And thank you very much for respecting no questions, because if we did questions, I know you'd ask questions I really don't want to answer in this setting about political circumstances. I just feel very grateful and thankful to be an American and have this happen to me at one of the best cardio hospitals in the world where I happen to be here. It all worked out for the best.
Now, I have to say here, studying that video and being an expert in healthcare and healthcare policy, I must make the following observation. Rush Limbaugh is fat.
But I would say, and I won't disagree with that, Rush Limbaugh less fat than he was when last I saw him.
He was indeed less fat,
yeah.
But that could be because he spent a night in the hospital and didn't get much of a chance to eat. Now, I don't say that just to be gratuitously unkind to Mr. Limbaugh, but the fact is that we know that obesity contributes to health problems. And we also know that our healthcare in this country ranks far below that of other developed countries in terms of outcomes and much higher in terms of cost. Now, what Mr. Limbaugh doesn't remark on, he was very happy with his hospital experience in Hawaii, which happens to be one of only 2 states in the entire nation that had something like comprehensive healthcare reform.
Well, it was also big, and I think bears mentioning that he acknowledged that Hawaii was in the United States.
That is true. That is, he doesn't think it's part of Kenya anymore,
exactly.
which is
That's
good.
Right, yeah.
So again, there's really not much to be said about Rush, except that he appeared to take the high road and say that I don't want to make this a political event. But of course, the entire tenor of his remarks was political, because he was saying we already have the best healthcare system in the world, as long as you don't have to worry about what happens when the medical bills start coming in, because there's a clear channel or is paying you $50 million a year.
Let's talk a little bit. I don't think, and of course there is debate from people who know and like yourself about where we rank in terms of the actual health care, and there is fantastic health care to be had in our country.
Oh, absolutely.
This is a billionaire. And the issue with healthcare in America is not the quality of it right now. It is the access to it, and it is the cost of it. And Rush Limbaugh is of the 0.00001% who could get anything he wants. I don't fault him for that. There are plenty of things to fault him for. His success, I won't. But the point that we are making constantly, and that you are making, and that a lot of people in Congress are making, because we have legislation going in that direction, is not necessarily about the quality of the care that somebody on the table gets in a hospital in the United States. It's the access to it and the cost of it. And that is something that wouldn't have, the first part didn't affect Limbaugh, because he was brought right in, taken good care of, and he has a press conference at a hospital in Hawaii. But the second part wouldn't affect him either, because the cost of it is exorbitant, and he has coverage, and he will be, hopefully for him, fine. And he can't help but politicize some things. I also like there is confirmation that in fact Rush Limbaugh has a heart, which
that's
I think
right.
That was something to come of this story.
And for all his misdeeds, like a good Buddhist would, I forgive him.
There you do. I mean, you are changing Buddhism as we speak. When I woke up this morning, it was an entirely different religion, and now it is just so forgiving and so welcoming,
and yet so badass.
And so, I haven't seen that yet.
No, okay, stick around.
Let's stay on healthcare. I mean, we have a minute or two to stay on healthcare. One thing that is happening today is that the Democrats in Congress have decided that the Congress, the Senate, and work with the White House, they're going to bypass the conference committee in ushering this bill to the president's desk before the State of the Union address. They're bypassing Republicans, which they have the ability to do because of their numbers. What do you think of this? To me, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I mean, this is not a way of coming in a bipartisan way.
No, I don't think so, and I also think it's a way of excluding the large numbers of different voices within the Democratic Party itself from the process. If you really have a small group of people, if you have Reid and Pelosi and the president, one or two others in the room, you're excluding the various active and vigorous caucuses within Congress and the different parties of interest, and you're doing something else, in my opinion, which is you're locking in something much closer to the Senate version of the health bill, which in my mind is significantly inferior to the House bill, because you're really saying, anything we do is going to have to pass that Senate test, and since those parties aren't in the room as part of the negotiation, it gives me the strong feeling that Obama is going to be leaning on everyone to take the version that he knows will pass.
Yeah, I mean, that's astute. I think it is also one thing I disagree with you about, Richard, is that they've all had their moment. They had their moment within their own House of Congress to speak, as a caucus, as a bloc, as a minority, as a majority, and this is what we're left with. The most compelling part, I think, of what you said was that it does diminish now the chances of the House bill passing, because for expedience, it seems most important to them to get something to the president before the State of the Union, so the president can come out there at the State of the Union and say we have comprehensive health care. And it, I think, appeases those within the caucus that say it's better to have something than nothing at all. I just also don't like the idea that we are continuing as Democrats a policy of that exists, that we complained about for 8 years in the previous administration, which is the exclusion of the minority party. As much as I can't stand what they have to say, especially on this issue, which is the most important issue to me, I still think that it sets a bad example, and politically I think it's foolish.
And here's a thought we might want to ponder for a minute. Why is it that we refuse to exclude the minority party when excluding them would create a more progressive bill, yet we insist on excluding them when that exclusion is likely to create a more conservative bill? That's something to ponder, isn't it?
No, that's true. That's going to take me into the next break, because I have to think about that. That makes a lot of sense, though. With that, we're going to be back with Brian Bender of the Boston Globe. After this break, we're going to be talking a little bit about nuclear energy, nuclear weaponry. We're going to be talking about Afghanistan, the CIA. I'm Michael Schur, Richard Eskow, J.R. Jackson, Jesus Godoy, Anna Kasparian, David Kohler. Everybody is here except for Cenk. You're watching the Young Turks. I just want to keep listening to it. This is my new favorite band. This is Nickelback, and if you haven't heard of them, that's why you tuned in today. J.R. Jackson playing. What's the name of that song?
Rockstar.
Rockstar.
Yeah. You knew that, Mike.
No, I thought it was like I want to be a rock star, because they keep saying I want to be a big rock star, and I didn't know exactly what it was called. I heard the song the other day.
This song is in heavy rotation in the Schur household. That's my understanding. Yeah.
If there were a song that was in heavy rotation, I was like, it's the C-SPAN theme between shows that's in heavy rotation in my house, and of course the Sports Center theme. But this is a good song, and Wayne Gretzky is in the video, so that's very exciting. We are waiting on a guest. We're waiting on Dan Gross of Newsweek. We want to talk. Actually, he has a pretty interesting take on what is going on with the economy, and what I like about it is that it is a layperson on economy on economics can relate to it, which I am, and basically he's talking. If we get him on, we'll talk with him about it. But he's talking about how we need a little more optimism. We need to get rid of the pessimism as it pertains to the economy.
He's saying everybody missed the bad signals of the last couple of years, and now he thinks everybody's missing the good signals that are coming along now.
Yeah. I think that it's informed by the fact that everybody's pessimistic about so much. I mean, they're pessimistic about going to the airport. They're pessimistic about all the little things that happen in life. And of course, why not? The economy was actually bad. Why, in fact, why should we not dwell on that by default? Because that's the thing that affects us all.
And we should be clear, and we'll talk to him when he gets on. He's not saying that just because everybody was wrong before when they were optimistic, they're probably wrong now that they're pessimistic. He feels he sees certain signs that things are getting better. Now, obviously, that's a contentious topic, and you have people like Paul Krugman and Joseph Stiglitz, economists, who are saying that we're still in danger and that things could get a lot worse.
Well, and there are people even more to the extreme of them, Richard, who are saying that the model that we've we've operated under forever, this Keynesian model. That it shows that we will recover, and then we'll have periods of decline and recovery. What if we just never recover? What if that was fine for 231 years or however long it lasted? But in fact, now now we've turned a corner where we will not recover.
It's always possible.
Perpetual decline, and here I am.
You're bumming me out.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's exactly.
And it's not till the end of Dan Gross's piece that he talks about the rest of us, as opposed to executives or investors, and how it feels to be laid off. He mentions a laid-off auto worker in Michigan or a laid-off magazine editor in Brooklyn. Two people are going to have tough times finding another job in their own profession. So I think that it'd be interesting to talk to him about the real economic story to me of the last year has been how much there are two economies in the United States, and how much the president and Congress have done to help the investor economy and the business economy, but how the Main Street versus Wall Street that we've heard so much about.
And it was best articulated, unfortunately, by Senator John Edwards, as he ran for president both times, is the whole idea of two Americas, which really exists. It was laid bare in Katrina, I think, as we saw that. People were appalled who didn't imagine that could happen in their country. And so the economy is the best example of how that happens on a daily basis.
Right. And, there was a book in the early 60s called The Other America, where I think that's where Edwards got the phrase, and he was writing about the poor. And now we have
Jacob Rees?
No, I had Harrington. Okay. I think it was David Harrington. But Edwards was talking about the middle class, the struggling middle class, and the rest of us, and that, if anything, has become more true.
Yeah.
And that's your point, I think, since he ran his campaign. That's very true, and what we've really seen, and one of the disappointments a lot of his supporters have had in the president, although we can talk, others could argue that he had no choice, but there's a sense that a lot has been done to stabilize the investor class and Wall Street, and not a lot has been done to improve the fortunes of the unemployed and underemployed and people who are just struggling to make it.
And those people are people who, there are educated, smart, reasonable people who believe that it has to happen in that order, because in order for the people at the bottom to feel the effects of it, the banks have to be stabilized, the auto companies have to be stabilized, that all these things have to happen. And I think a lot of people wonder why they can't happen in tandem. But without the banks being stabilized, without mortgage, without the ability to give mortgages, it's not going to stabilize the lower and lower middle classes and middle classes. But that's an argument for people who know more about this than I do. But I do know that there's that I've heard reasonable people say that, reasonable liberals say that even. And
I think the danger and where the debate gets very arcane sometimes is where do we go from that kind of logic to trickle-down economics?
Well,
and that's why there comes a point where I do say I disagree with Paul Krugman sometimes on healthcare, but in most other areas of economics, I just say, well, what does Krugman say?
Yeah.
What does Stiglitz say? What do those guys say? Because now you're in areas where I can't claim expertise either, but it's a very complicated issue.
It is, and trickle down was based on. I mean, this was based on actuality. I mean, this was money that was going to save a dying bank at its most base.
Right.
Trickle down was based on fantasy.
Right.
So I think that when you're talking about a practical model versus a fantastic model, the Reagan David Stockman era,
right.
It is a little bit different. But again, I defer to people who know more about this than I do. But I form my opinions based on people like Paul Krugman because they're certainly compelling. I guess we're not going to get Dan Gross on the show today, unfortunately. Go to Newsweek.com. The article's called "Snap Out of It." It's very quick and it's actually quite interesting because it speaks to you about the economy as if you don't know about the economy, which is what I like. We also, I mean, I think that it's worth it bears mentioning that that just to sort of continue this on the economy for a second, that everybody is starting to get used to a new way of talking about the economy. So the idea of putting things in as simple as optimism and pessimism and stepping away from the actual numbers crunching and taxation and percentages and all of that, I think I think is helpful to the national debate, because most people cannot speak about it in an educated way.
Right.
Yeah, so I think that as that gradually starts happening, that may feed an optimism as people understand it in a way that is not so sophisticated that it can help.
Well, you know what's interesting to me is I think from maybe the mid-'90s on, we had a period of what I would call pop investment, pop culture investment, the Jim Cramers and the financial cable networks,
right.
and
the whole idea of the day trader.
The day trader, the talking baby, which has got to be the most annoying ad on television. The whole concept that, just do the analytics, that whole school of marketing the stock market as something that anybody can play with, which was huge for 10 years. And I think a turning point in all of that was Jon Stewart's takedown of Jim Cramer on his show, where Cramer apologized, and then within 2 or 3 days he was back to his old tricks and taking it. I went into the gym the other day and saw Jim Cramer in the locker room on the big screen TV where the guys are changing, and I thought, why are you still talking?
Yeah.
And why is anybody still listening? So I think we had that irrational exuberance, to use the Fed chairman's words, followed by this disillusionment with the whole process. Maybe Dan Gross's pieces and pieces like it are a sign that we're getting to something more rational with the public's relationship to the economy, which is that of people who know it's good sometimes, it's bad sometimes, and we have a right, as you said, to have it explained to us in plain English.
Yeah. And I think if that sort of, there's a contagiousness about that, as time goes on, I mean, and not in a quick way, but as we start sort of putting it into a vernacular that we can all understand, we may in fact become more optimistic. We may understand why we should be and grasp onto them. Right now, we're only being fed doom and gloom about everything, truthfully. I mean, America is a sad country right now in large part. Because every day there's news that is, as soon as we get used to the way we fly again, we have something happen the other day, and then we have airports closed, as what happened at Newark Airport yesterday. We have a whole new method of screening. We have Jim DeMint, a senator from South Carolina, holding up the nomination of a TSA chief because he thinks the TSA chief is too cozy on collective bargaining with union people. I mean, the whole idea that we're holding up the most important, as the Republicans argued forever, I don't agree, but the most important person in the head of the TSA and the head of our protection every day, because he is in bed with the unions. I mean, that doesn't matter. That does not affect how well we are protected in this country. So, I think that and I got off track a little bit, but the point being is there's always something negative going on. So to put a little positive into the conversation.
And where is the positive exactly?
Well, I think that what Dan Gross is saying is that we need to move away from pessimism a little bit, and we need to start speaking optimistically and hearing the optimism. Yeah, that's true. We have to pick through a lot to find it. But there are economists who do say that things are getting better. We have to grasp onto those things too. I mean, to talk about the green light, all the green lights you made, if you're going to complain about all the red lights you missed.
Right, and I think that's implied in Daniel Gross's piece too, is that there's a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy at work here sometimes, that if you think everything's going to be terrible, particularly with something like the economy, it pretty much is going to be terrible, because we'll stop buying the consumer products we enjoy, and then the companies that sell them will suffer, more people will get laid off, people who want to invest in new warehousing, new spare parts for whatever it is they build won't buy them because they don't think anyone will buy it, and we go into a death spiral. So I think what he's really saying is let's spin out of that downward cycle of negativity, and I think that's what you're saying too. And in terms of TSA and some of these other things, I think a great way to do that would be to get a TSA chief on board, stop politicizing, as you were describing, that appointment. And it would also be nice if someday we could start having security measures when we fly on airplanes that have more to do with the actual threats we face.
Right.
Because nothing that's happened since the underpants bomber attempted to blow up that plane is except the announcements in the last day or two regarding foreign countries, is anything that would have actually kept us safe from him.
Right, that's true. I mean, but then you get down the slippery slope of profiling and the things that make everybody uncomfortable. In any case, RJ and I will be back after the break. You're listening and watching The Young Turks. Stay with us. Some great guests coming up in the next hour, and a lot more hard news. Welcome to Young Turks. This is the very first show of the year 2010 or 2010 or 2010, as I heard someone say the other day.
That's one too many zeros.
I know it is. That's why
that's in 10,000 years from now.
Yeah, exactly. I'm Michael Shore, Richard Eskow. Cenk Uygur will be back on the show on Wednesday. I'll be back tomorrow with Wes Clark. We have plenty to talk about coming into 2010, or however you're referring to it as. But most importantly, I think we have to play off of what happened on the Sunday shows as it pertains to national security, as it pertains to terrorism, and a reaction to what happened on the Delta Northwest flight last week. And I think that it bears listening to John Brennan, is the Deputy National Security Advisor for Homeland Security. He's also a Deputy Assistant to the President. And he's worked for 5 different administrations. And this comes in response to a large degree, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, to Dick Cheney, our former and beloved Vice President, talking about how the Obama administration has made our country more dangerous. So let's listen to John Brennan, then we'll listen to Richard, we'll listen to me, and we'll sort of dissect a little bit about what's being said. The first clip, JR, is number 1, John Brennan.
Republicans have been very critical of this president and accuse him of returning to a pre-9/11 mentality, of becoming lax in the face of terror, of essentially letting America's guard down. Former Vice President Dick Cheney said this to Politico this past week. Let me put his comment up on the screen. As I've watched the events of the last few days, it is clear once again that President Obama is trying to pretend we are not at war. He seems to think he has a low-key response to an attempt to blow up an airliner and kill hundreds of people. We won't be at war. He seems to think if we bring the mastermind of September 11th to New York, give him a lawyer and trial in civilian court, we won't be at war. He seems to think if he closes Guantanamo and releases the hardcore al-Qaeda-trained terrorists still there, we won't be at war. He seems to think if he gets rid of the words war on terror, we won't be at war. But we are at war, and when President Obama pretends we aren't, it makes us less safe. How do you respond to that?
I'm very disappointed in the Vice President's comments. I'm neither a Republican nor a Democrat. I've worked for the past 5 administrations, and either the Vice President is willfully mischaracterizing this President's position, both in terms of the language he uses and the actions he's taken, or he's ignorant of the facts. And in either case, it doesn't speak well of what the Vice President is doing. The clear evidence is that this President has been very, very strong. In his inaugural address, he said, we're at war with this international network of terrorists. We continue to say that we're at war with al-Qaeda. We're trying to give it some clarity, and we have taken the fight to them. We've continued, in fact, many of the activities of the previous administration. I would not have come back into this government if I felt that this president was not committed to prosecuting this war against al-Qaeda. And every day I see it in the president's face, I see it in the actions he's taken, and so I'm confident that this country is in fact protected by this president's position on al-Qaeda and against terrorist activities. We're going to continue to do this, we're going to do it hard, we're going to do it constantly.
You know, for those of us who are just listening to us right now and not seeing the webcast, I think one of the striking things about that clip for me, visually, is that this is not a spring chicken. This is not a young guy. This is a guy with a lot of government experience, and by his facial expression and his body posture, he's very angry. He's very upset at the politicizing of our national security in this way, don't you think?
Well, absolutely, but more than just the politicizing, which I guess it all is the intimation that somehow we live in a more dangerous country because of the president that we have now, as opposed to the president we had then. And there's nothing to support that. I mean, the whole idea of dropping war on terror from the lexicon and dropping the word war altogether, I don't know that doesn't inform our policy at all. We are just as steadfast as this man is telling us with President Obama in the White House about fighting terrorism as we are. I mean, and you heard it in the president's remarks from Hawaii. I mean, this is not taken lightly by this administration. It is the #1 goal. Tom Kean, who the former governor of New Jersey who sat on the 9/11 Commission, accused the Obama administration of being sidetracked by the economy and by health care. He's the president of the United States. His job is to take care of the economy and health care. It is also to keep us safe. Because we've been putting in healthcare legislation, that is not the reason that a man from Nigeria got onto a plane in Amsterdam. I mean, or switched planes, and so what I'm talking about here is that one thing does not necessarily have to do with the other. He's the president. Of course he's going to be distracted. He's going to be dealing with a lot of things. He's going to be inviting, the Yankees to the White House, too. I mean, there are things that go on in his day that are important. And Brennan is saying here that his take on the Obama administration, one that he joined to fight terrorism, is that they are fully intent on doing it. And I don't think what the former vice president says matters.
Well, I think you're right about that. I think that anyone who would listen to the former vice president has made up their mind anyway. So I don't think he's taken seriously as a commentator. I think Brennan is also saying not only that the administration is fully engaged on this issue, but that they understand it and they're handling it right. People who know me know that I don't hesitate to criticize the president or the Democrats if I disagree with them. I think by and large they've done a very, very good job from what I can see on national security and national defense. A problem of this kind, the Christmas Day incident, is very, very hard to address because you're really talking about policies that lead out. It's not just a matter of screening in our airports.
Right.
It's not a matter of what we train our pilots to do. It's not just a matter of our intelligence services or the integrity of our databases and whether they talk to each other, although that is an issue in this case. But it also has to do with what our consular staff around the world do and don't have at their disposal, how they address these problems. And we've made a great, I'm really going to cut the president some slack on this one, even though I think we can learn from this and get better, which we should always do. Everybody makes a big issue out of the fact that the man's father wrote to the State Department and said that he's worried about his son might be a threat, and yet his son was allowed to board a plane. Yes, I think we can tighten up some procedures and learn better, but I think it's not until you've worked, I was a consultant for the State Department at one point, it's not until you've sort of seen the sheer magnitude of work that goes on from around the world do you realize that we probably get tens of thousands of warnings every month. So the fact that one of them came through and turned out to be a potential threat, thank God nobody was hurt, but the fact that one of them came through does not mean it was a breakthrough of the entire system, a breakdown rather.
Well,
it'd be a breakdown if we pursued every case too, so we have to get smarter about finding the ones that are a real threat.
I don't know that I agree with that. I don't think it would be a breakdown. I think that there has to be a siphoning process that tells you which are the important ones and which aren't. But I do think that everyone has to be looked at. And we have a Secret Service that goes to every town in America whenever somebody says something defamatory about the president or wanting to injure somebody who is under Secret Service protection. So I think that there is a way to monitor it, and Brennan acknowledged, the president has not acknowledged, the man getting on the plane is obviously a breakdown of something. So we can't afford to have that happen. That's not to say it won't happen, but I do think that it reflects poorly on intelligence if our intelligence communities aren't working together enough. And if in fact this person was warned, I mean that's no different than saying there's some crazy people taking flying lessons in Arizona right now. I mean, I do think that those type of things have to be taken seriously. And if we need more people to take them seriously, then we have to put more people in those positions.
I think the lesson is not just that we need more people. I'm not denying that there are lessons to be taken from this and that there are things we could have done better, quite the opposite. But I'm saying, let's learn from this experience, and let's say one of the things we can learn is that we need computer systems that are accessible to everybody that needs them around the world, that are integrated, that talk to one another, so when a guy gets a letter in Nigeria at the consulate or embassy there, he can enter that into a database. It goes to the right people. Everybody knows if that name shows up on a passenger list, they're flagged, they're taken off the plane. There's a lot we can learn from this, but politicizing it seems like a shameful way to go.
Yeah, well, it certainly does, and it brings up a good point. And one thing you said that I agree with just about everything you said, and I'm talking about the two things that I don't agree with. One is that Vice President Cheney is, in fact, in my opinion, a commentator who is taken seriously on this, because enough people in America turn to him and they hear a former vice president, a former hawk, a former espouser of their beliefs talk about a breakdown. They take it very seriously. And what's interesting to me is, what is the White House to do? I mean, should the White House respond to something like this when a former vice president comes out? Part of me says they should come out fighting, and I know if Jank were sitting with me right now, he'd say, they should come out fighting. Oh, they should do it. But of
course
they should. But the point I'm making is, sometimes you have to just sort of treat people as gadflies and
Right.
let them go away.
Right, and you can also send the John Brennans of the world, too.
Yeah.
You don't have to respond personally. I think there have been times when, I disagree with Cenk on this, and he knows it. I think there have been times when the president responded to Dick Cheney, and he should not have. I think he basically should be above that kind of fray. I think he should be telling the American people that he is doing everything they can to keep that he can to keep the country safe, and let other people go after it. Let Joe Biden do it. Joe
Yeah.
Biden would be a perfect choice, and he'd do a great job.
Exactly, and it's a vice president talking about a vice president.
Right.
Well, we have plenty more to talk about in this hour on the Young Turks, and we're going to be back with a couple of interesting guests back to back in the next 2 segments. But please stay with us. We have a lot of interesting talk, a lot about Homeland Security as well. I'm Michael Schur, along with Richard Eskow. You are watching and listening to the Young Turks.